Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into extraterrestrial life. We got a ton of source material from you this time around, including some stuff from Wikipedia's extraterrestrial life page, so
Oh, yeah.
we're ready to get into it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so we're going to explore the science, the history, and all the cultural stuff around the search for life beyond Earth.
Yeah, it's a topic that's always captured people's imagination for uh, centuries. And the more we learn about the universe, the more complex those questions become.
Exactly. So, okay, let's start with just the size of everything. The
Yeah.
sheer scale of it all.
Right.
Wikipedia mentions that the observable universe, there's 2 trillion galaxies.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Trillion with a T.
It is.
It's impossible to even wrap your head around how big that is.
Right.
Does that make you think that extraterrestrial life is more likely? Given that vastness,
It certainly makes the idea that we're alone seem very improbable.
right.
Statistically speaking, if you think about it, like baking a cake the size of a planet. Yeah. Finding one chocolate chip is pretty much a certainty.
Yeah.
So the universe, with all of its trillions of stars and planets, that's our cake.
Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
And speaking of ingredients, Wikipedia also talks about the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
Carbon and water, which are scattered throughout the universe.
Right, and those are essential for the kind of life that we know here on Earth.
Right.
Carbon can form those complex molecules that we need,
Yeah.
and water acts as a solvent. So they're both cornerstones of our biochemistry.
But are they the only cornerstones possible?
Well, that's a good question.
Right.
And that's where we get into the idea of alternative biochemistries.
Right. Could life exist without carbon or water?
Potentially, yeah.
What if instead of searching for water, we should be looking for vast oceans of liquid methane?
That's a possibility we can't rule out.
Right.
Some scientists theorize about silicon-based life forms
Wow.
which could thrive in environments that would be toxic to us. And even here on Earth, we have what are called extremophiles,
Right.
organisms that exist in really, really harsh conditions like scorching hydrothermal vents or acidic hot springs.
So if life can exist in those crazy environments here,
Yeah.
could it exist on other planets or moons?
Exactly, and that's what makes places like Europa with its subsurface oceans or Enceladus with its geysers spewing water vapor and organic molecules so fascinating.
Right.
If there are hydrothermal vents on those moons similar to the ones on Earth, it could provide the energy and the building blocks necessary for life, even in those extreme environments.
It's a really captivating thought.
Oh, it is.
But I think it's really interesting that the idea of other worlds and extraterrestrial life,
Yes.
it's not a new thing with modern science.
Not at all.
Wikipedia notes that ancient Greek philosophers like Democritus and Epicurus,
Yeah.
they were already talking about this stuff centuries ago.
They believed in a plurality of worlds
Yeah.
teeming with life. And later thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo challenged that geocentric view of the universe, which really opened up the possibilities for extraterrestrial life.
Right.
And then Darwin's theory of evolution came along, and it suggested that life on Earth evolved in all these incredibly diverse ways.
Right.
So you can imagine the possibilities on other planets with different conditions.
So all these ideas from ancient philosophy to modern science, they all intertwine and connect.
They do.
So with all this potential for life out there, why haven't we found any concrete evidence yet?
Well, that brings us to the Fermi Paradox,
Right, the Fermi Paradox.
which highlights this contradiction
Yeah,
between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations and our lack of evidence.
it's like our giant cake. Again, statistically, there should be tons of chocolate chips, but we haven't found a single one yet.
Exactly.
It's a head scratcher.
It is.
Wikipedia does mention the Drake equation as a way to estimate the number of communicative civilizations in our galaxy. Could you tell me more about that?
Sure, the Drake equation is more of a thought experiment than anything.
Okay.
It takes into account factors like the rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the number of those planets that could support life, and so on.
Okay.
But the problem is that a lot of those factors are still unknowns,
Right.
so it's tough to get a reliable estimate.
So it's more about framing the problem.
Yeah, framing the problem and thinking critically
Yeah.
about the different variables that influence the likelihood of finding extraterrestrial life.
Okay.
And it shows us how vast this search really is.
And speaking of the search, how are scientists currently approaching it? I know there's kind of 2 main approaches, right? Searching for basic life forms like microbes and then searching for intelligent life.
Right.
Are there any promising new methods being developed?
Well, both approaches are important,
Yeah.
and scientists are doing a lot of different things.
Okay.
They're analyzing telescope data,
Sure.
studying meteorites, using radio telescopes to listen for signals. And we're constantly refining our methods and developing new technologies. For example, the next generation of telescopes will
Yeah.
allow us to analyze the atmospheres of distant planets,
Okay.
looking for signs of life.
It's exciting to think about all that we might find in the next few years.
It is.
But before we get too far ahead, let's focus on our own solar system for a second.
Okay.
Are there any places that are good candidates for extraterrestrial life in our little cosmic neighborhood?
Yeah, there are a few places that stand out.
Okay.
Mars, with its potential for past or present microbial life, is really interesting.
All right.
And as we discussed, the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn Europa and Enceladus hold a lot of promise.
Yeah.
Their subsurface oceans could harbor life forms unlike anything we've ever seen.
These places really capture the imagination. It's like they're each holding a secret that we're just waiting to uncover.
Right.
But before we get into those specific locations, I think it's really important to address like the cultural impact of this whole search for extraterrestrial life. It's not just science, right? It's in our art literature, even our fears.
Absolutely. Science fiction has played a huge role in shaping public perception of extraterrestrial life.
Right.
Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
Yeah.
The classic gray alien archetype that was popularized by stories like the Barney and Betty Hill abduction is a good example.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting how those narratives become so ingrained in our collective consciousness.
It's like even without concrete proof, we've already created these images of what aliens might be like in our minds.
Right.
But how do we separate those cultural perceptions from scientific reality?
Well, that's a really important distinction to make.
Right.
Science fiction is great for sparking curiosity and getting people thinking, but it shouldn't be mistaken for actual scientific evidence. We
Right.
need to stick to the scientific method and be open to the possibility that alien life might be completely different.
Totally different from anything we've ever imagined. That's a really good point. And it leads to another question. How are governments responding to the possibility of extraterrestrial life? What's being done to prepare for potential contact?
There are actually guidelines in place developed by organizations like NASA and the UN for what they call planetary protection.
Okay.
This is all about safeguarding Earth from potential contamination by alien life forms and vice versa.
It sounds like something out of a movie, but it makes sense.
It does.
We need to be prepared.
We're venturing into uncharted territory,
Yeah.
and it's crucial to consider the risks and the ethical implications of our actions.
We have to be responsible explorers.
Exactly.
That's a perfect place to pause for now. I think
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground in this first part.
We have.
You know, from the size of the universe to the science and history behind the search for extraterrestrial life. But the big question is still out there. What happens if we actually find it?
That's the question we'll be discussing in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the potential impact of contact and what it could mean for humanity as a whole.
I can't wait.
It's going to be fascinating. Welcome back. We were just talking about planetary protection.
Right?
It's a really interesting topic, this whole idea of blending science with ethics.
It is.
But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
We've talked about the search and the precautions.
Yeah.
What if we actually make contact?
Right. What would that mean for humanity?
That's the big question.
Yeah, and it's one that's been talked about and imagined in science fiction for years.
Right, it has.
But reality is probably a lot more complicated than those stories.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The actual impact of something like that would be so complex.
So many factors.
So many factors.
So many things would come into play.
Exactly. The nature of the extraterrestrial civilization, their intentions, their technology, all of that would matter.
Okay, so let's say we get a clear signal from an alien intelligence.
Okay.
What happens next?
Well, the initial reaction would probably be a mix of awe, disbelief, and maybe even a little fear.
Right.
I mean, it would challenge everything we think we know about the universe and our place in it.
I can imagine the news going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Social media would explode.
Absolutely.
Governments and scientists would be trying to figure out what to do.
Everybody would be scrambling to decipher the signal and figure out how to respond.
The whole world would be captivated by this.
The whole world.
Scientists would be analyzing it, trying to figure out where it came from, how complex it is, what it means.
Oh, are they trying to communicate with us? Is it a greeting? A warning?
It's almost too much to think about.
It is.
I mean, what would this kind of contact do to all of our belief system?
Oh, it would definitely trigger a huge reassessment of our values and beliefs.
Our religions.
Religions.
Everything.
Our understanding of life itself.
Do you think contact with an alien civilization would bring humanity together, or would it divide us?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
Right.
Some people think that something this big would force us to recognize our shared humanity. We'd be facing something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Bigger than our differences.
Right.
But others worry that it could make existing tensions even worse.
Right.
Imagine the competition for resources, or the fear of the unknown.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
But let's try to focus on the positive for a second.
Okay.
What kind of scientific advancements could come from contact with an advanced alien civilization?
Oh, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Imagine the things we could learn about their technology, their understanding of physics, their biology.
It would be like a revolution in science.
A complete revolution.
Yeah.
Our understanding of physics, biology, even consciousness could be totally transformed.
All of our textbooks would be obsolete.
Outdated overnight.
We have to start over.
We might discover new forms of energy, new ways to travel through space, new medical technologies.
That's mind-blowing.
The potential is limitless.
But we also have to think about the challenges of communication.
Right.
I mean, even here on Earth, we have a hard time understanding each other. So how would we ever understand a species that evolved on a completely different planet?
That's one of the biggest hurdles we would face.
Yeah.
Their language,
Yeah.
their thought processes, even how they see reality, could be completely alien to us.
I mean, imagine trying to communicate with a species that doesn't see the same colors we do.
Or hear the same sounds.
Would we even recognize their communication as communication?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What if their methods are so different from ours that we don't even realize what we're seeing?
We could be surrounded by alien signals right now and not even know it.
It's possible.
Okay, so let's bring it back down to Earth for a minute.
Sure.
How would our governments and institutions handle this?
It would be unlike anything we've ever dealt with before.
Yeah.
Governments would have to work together, share information, and figure out how to communicate and potentially interact with this new civilization.
Do you think the United Nations would play a role in all of this?
I think it would be a global effort.
It would be fascinating to see how different countries would respond.
Yeah. Would there be a push for global unity, or would national interests come first?
Would we come together or would we fall apart?
That's the question.
It's like this whole hypothetical situation would really test humanity.
It would show us what we're really made of.
Our ability to work together, our fears, our hopes.
Everything.
Before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to talk about the philosophical side of all of this.
Okay.
How would contact change our understanding of our place in the universe?
That's a question philosophers have been asking for centuries.
Yeah.
Contact with another intelligent species would force us to rethink everything we thought we knew about human consciousness.
Are we really the only ones who think and feel and are aware of ourselves?
And what about our purpose?
Right. If we're not alone, does that make us less special?
Or does it make our existence even more precious?
I don't know.
These are questions that would impact every aspect of human society. Our art, our literature, our religions. We would have to grapple with existential questions on a scale never before imagined.
It's an overwhelming thought,
It is.
but also kind of exciting.
It is. It speaks to our curiosity,
Okay.
our desire to understand the universe.
And our place in it.
Exactly. The search for extraterrestrial life is also a search for ourselves.
That's a really good point.
It's a quest to understand who we are and where we belong in the grand scheme of things.
And it's just beginning.
It is.
In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to explore what contact could mean for different parts of human society, from religion and technology to our everyday lives. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into extraterrestrial life. We've talked about the science, the possibilities, and the challenges, but now let's really get into it. What happens to us if we actually make contact?
It's the biggest unknown, right? Science fiction has explored this in so many ways.
Right, so many ways.
But it's probably way more complicated than any story can really capture.
Oh, definitely way more nuanced.
Yeah.
So in the last part, we talked about unity and division, scientific revolutions, and even just how we'd communicate. But
Right.
let's look at some specific areas of human society, like
Oh.
how about religion?
Okay.
How would religions deal with knowing we're not alone?
Well, some religions might actually incorporate that pretty easily into what they already believe.
Oh, interesting.
They might see it as proof of a bigger cosmic plan,
Yeah.
a creator with like a limitless imagination.
But for others, it might be harder, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Some religions would really struggle with that.
Yeah.
They might have to completely rethink their scriptures and traditions.
Right, because a lot of those are based on the idea that humans are unique.
Exactly. It
Right.
could lead to all sorts of debates and disagreements within religions,
Even new religions, maybe?
possibly even new religions branching off.
And what about technology? We talked about the potential for huge leaps forward.
Yeah.
But could it also lead to like a technological arms race?
It's definitely a possibility, especially if the aliens seem more advanced than us. Nations might feel like they need to build up their defenses,
Yeah.
develop new weapons to keep up or even get ahead.
So it's like this double-edged sword.
Exactly.
We could collaborate and learn so much.
We could.
But there's also that fear, right?
Oh yeah, the fear of being left behind or even taken advantage of.
And that fear could lead to more conflict.
It could create mistrust and paranoia, which could destabilize things globally.
So maybe contact wouldn't be the perfect utopia some people imagine.
Probably not.
But what about everyday life? How would contact affect our culture, our art, how we see ourselves?
It would be everywhere, in our art, music, literature.
Right.
Everything would be influenced by this new understanding of our place in the universe.
Imagine all the philosophical debates, the existential crises, but also the wonder and curiosity.
Absolutely. It would be a time of huge intellectual and artistic exploration.
And would it change how we see ourselves?
Potentially, yeah.
Right.
We still define ourselves by nationality, religion, ethnicity.
Right. Would those things even matter as much?
Maybe our sense of self would expand. We might start thinking of ourselves as citizens of Earth first.
Right. Part of a bigger planetary community.
Exactly. Connected not just to all of humanity, but to other intelligent beings out there.
Like our circle of empathy would just grow bigger.
Exactly. It would change what it means to be human, to be alive, to be part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
That's a really powerful thought.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is to be curious, but also critical.
Okay.
Don't believe everything you hear. Question things, look at the science, the history, the philosophy, and come to your own conclusions.
That's great advice. And remember, this is really just the beginning of the conversation.
It is.
The search for extraterrestrial life is going to keep going. And who knows what we'll find.
It's a journey full of possibilities.
Exactly. So keep looking up at the stars, keep asking questions, and keep an open mind.
The universe is full of wonders.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into extraterrestrial life. Thanks for joining us. We encourage you to keep exploring those sources you gave us and keep thinking about these questions because they're not going away anytime soon.
And who knows what the future holds.
Exactly. Until next time, keep exploring.